I mean, and then so, and we can just it's just so easy, and we can just yeah, I think we can make that we can make that case demonstrably how, how the state doesn't provide that while we're here. But I don't know from this. But yeah, I would say from just my attitude with that, in the past month or so, I'm not really necessarily going to go out and for just changing. My focus isn't so much in changing person's minds, because that's a lot of strain and whatever, but just making my point, and hopefully they see it. But still, listening to their wants and needs, because I mean, for non-libertarians, non-volunteers, I mean, there are some things that they're legitimate needs and legitimate concerns to the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they see maybe they're really concerned about old people getting health care, or get the environment, or like the safety or stability of their jobs, and so they see all of these threats to that, and the strategy that they're used to going to is government. But if you can have a conversation with them and empathize with the needs that are underlying their concerns, then they can open up a new space to hear a different strategy. Once they can trust that what it is that they're worried about. But if you're coming to the place of like your concerns are illegitimate and your strategies are violent, people aren't going to have the space to hear your perspective too. So that's one thing that NBC really enables us to do, is to authentically express our perspectives, because it's not about just being nice to people or only saying like things that won't upset anybody. Because we want to be real, right? We want to. We have important ideas to share, but we want to do it in a way that we actually are able to connect with people and that they can hear what we're saying. Because otherwise, we're creating more enemies, even.
Yeah, and that's an important thing you just mentioned, though. Of course, I mean, this isn't just about just saying things that are that people don't want to that they just always want to hear all the time, though, because I mean, these are important ideas. These are, and things that, and this might upset people as part of, as we might try not to. So, so that is important. So I guess we can say, well, how would you go from that? We'll say from. For something, I was trying to think of an example of how we can do that. How can we
honestly express ourselves when maybe it might upset somebody? Is that the question?
Yes, that's basically what I'm thinking. I'm trying to think of an example, but
I mean, I can think of all kinds of examples, like maybe you're invited to your brother's wedding and you can't go for whatever reason. Like maybe you don't even have a reason that might justify it, quote unquote, but you really wanted to do something else and you made other plans. And like the standard approach to that would be to cancel your own plans and go out of obligation or duty to this person and then not have a good time or whatever. And when I think about that, do I really want anybody coming to my wedding who doesn't want to be there? No, not really. So the first thing would be to express to the person that that you can hear their feelings and needs and what they're saying. Like, let me see. Maybe this wasn't the best example, but I can still work with it. Like, okay, so brother, like, you're really important in my life. I love you. I love to be a part of your life, and I'm really celebrating that you want to include me in your special day. And at the same time, I really have, been working hard and have made plans to go on this vacation all this time, and that's what I'd really like to do. And I would be willing to celebrate with you at another time instead. Would you be willing to tell me what you heard me say, and then see how that goes? And they might get really upset, right? Because this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. How could you do this? How could you not show up? So then you would just empathize with their concerns of whatever comes up to them. Like, oh, it sounds like, are you feeling really angry because you think that I should be there? You know, and they might be like, yeah, you're such an asshole if you don't come. And just to continue with the empathy process. It's more challenging, I want to say, really challenging to do this with family and close relationships. It's the most difficult to practice. Those are what I would call like your Super Bowl kind of situations, right? Where we tend to get the most emotionally stimulated. Whereas, like, when you're practicing just with somebody in passing that you don't have a big investment in emotionally, it's a little bit easier to navigate. But,
right. Yeah, that's something that's you kind of understand. You're generally easier to have these conversations about whatever, just looking about politics and I guess religion, whatever. That just maybe like the family around like Thanksgiving or Christmas or whatever, where you're raised in, and there's a lot of of course, then you can think of there's a lot of, I guess, because you can probably think of a lot of moral judgments that can be implied there, like you don't want to insult them or insult your upbringing or insult their intentions for this, that, and other. But okay, let's try another example, another little role play here.
okay.
We'll say you're dealing with one of your brothers or sisters or whatever, and they just had a baby, and you really want them to not spank your niece or nephew.
Yeah, this is a huge challenge, especially, I mean, the traditional, I think, approach, or like what somebody might typically do, is to say all the reasons why spanking is wrong and why they shouldn't do it. Right? Like, spanking is demonstrated to show, that kids are going to be more violent when they grow up if they're punished. And, maybe throw a bunch of statistics at them and all of these logical reasons why not. And that may or may not work. But an NVC approach might be like, let's say it's my sister. Like, hey, sister, I'm so happy for you that you brought this new life into this world. And I know that I trust that you really want to just nurture this little baby as best as you can so they have the most wonderful life possible. And I've read some things that have me kind of concerned about the way that we were raised, and I'm noticing that it's actually affecting my life as a grown-up now, and I'm wondering if you might be open to hearing more about that. So the first step would be just to see if they even want to have a conversation about this, because so often they don't. And it's kind of like inviting somebody for tea, I guess. When someone comes over to your house, you don't just shove the tea down their throat, right? You ask them if they want a glass first. So, and then if they're open to it, then great. Okay, so these are the things that I've noticed. And stick just to observations without evaluations or interpretations of it. So, and this would be your statistics or whatever, but you could say, well, I remember when Dad spanked me when I was 5, I felt really scared. I felt really alone. I felt really sad and upset and disconnected. Like, I really wanted Dad to just love me and understand where I was coming from. And I don't think this was helpful for our relationship. And I'm wondering if you had the same experience, or maybe you have some different perspective on this. And then hear them out. And maybe they don't see anything wrong with it, right? But maybe they say, well, yeah, we were spanked, but we turned out fine. That's something you hear a lot. So then you might empathize with that. Like, so you don't really see this strategy as being problematic in any way. And they might say, no, not really. And you could say, okay, would you be willing to consider that maybe for some people it has caused problems? And just continue with that, mostly asking questions and just guessing their feelings and needs. and staying in touch with your own. But the difference is you don't want to be going into the conversation trying to change their mind about the topic. And it's really hard not to do that, especially when it's something that's so important, right? Like the whole spanking thing. It's a big challenge. But I find that also people want to accomplish this in one conversation. And it's actually been more effective for me to just plant seeds and leave doors open. So I might ask this question of my sister and just begin the conversation without any judgment, and then she could come and talk to me about it later and be like, hey, remember when we were talking about this? And had me thinking. And I cannot say how many times this has actually happened to me, where other people have come to me following up from a conversation that maybe in the past I would have considered unsuccessful or incomplete because they didn't change their mind to my perspective. But when I just come to them with the curiosity and empathy, they become more open and interested in my perspective because they trust that I care about them too. It's not just me trying to change them.
Absolutely. And I have never, just observations just for me. I have never been able to. I don't think there's ever been told that you've actually anyone has ever been able to change anyone's mind in just one conversation, as you said about anything, whether that's just trying to stop them from spanking, or trying to get them to vote for Ron Paul, or just nothing. It's nothing like that. But every once in a while, you do see that just conversations, planting seeds, though, and eventually later on, you do see fruits. Yeah, so I definitely have. I've recently at PorcFest I had somebody come up to me who talked to me 3 years ago, who said, that one conversation totally changed my life, and I had no idea, I didn't try to make some grand statement or anything like this. I was just curious and offered them empathy. And this really kind of opened up a whole new way of looking at things for them. So, don't underestimate that. Yeah. So I guess what was that conversation? I don't know. As a guess, was it of them? Were they minarchists? Were they just decided to become voluntarists, or just?
They were actually a friend of a friend, and we met at this event at this farm. And apparently, I barely even remember this, but I was telling them about nonviolent communication and how I had been learning about it and practicing it, and that was, really in alignment with my apolitical philosophy, and here's why. And he noticed me at PorcFest, and he was like, hey, were you here 3 years ago? And I was like, yeah, and then he reiterated the conversation and said, it had him kind of thinking about things differently, and then he started researching NBC, and that it totally transformed his relationship with his daughter. And his daughter's 6, I think, and they've just, transcended the whole punishment reward thing and have way more connection and peace in their relationship. And also, there he was at PorcFest, which is a total